What a scary picture that is on screen as we're looking at the 3D infrared imagery here of Hurricane Beryl in the late morning of our June 30th, 2024. Welcome in, everybody. If you're tuning in from the Atlantic, great. If you're tuning in from America, great. I've got an update for both of you. One on this hurricane, and then the other part of this update in this video is going to be on the USA's weather for the rest of this week. So let's go ahead and get right into the tropical side of things. Timestamps are in the description if you want to skip ahead to any given part. For today's headlines, Beryl is rapidly intensifying as a major hurricane. In fact, it just became Cat 4 based off aircraft reconnaissance missions right before this video started getting filmed here. We have Category 4 to 5 winds and gusts expected for parts of the Windward Islands. We're going to see sustained winds likely of Category 4 strength, possibly high end. Definitely some of those gusts reaching over that Category 5 threshold, over 155 to 160 miles per hour for sure. Jamaica and the Cayman Islands are in the longer range track here of this system beyond the Windward Islands and the Caribbean. I'm also watching the Gulf and USA with Beryl down the line, as well as the next invest that could move through the Caribbean later this week. So let's go ahead and get right into it here. Looking at that latest National Hurricane Center advisory and cone. This is the 11 a.m. time frame update here. And as you can see, Beryl has just jumped up into that Category 3 to now 4 threshold into overnight last night and into this morning here. What you're looking at is a little bit, as I draw that line of that curve towards the west-northwest as it starts to make a little bit of that turn towards Grenada and some of those Caribbean islands here. Now, while this says Cat 3 and it says 120 mile per hour wind speed here as of the 11 a.m. advisory, the hurricane hunters did find 130 mile per hour winds sustained in this storm during the reconnaissance mission soon after. So keep in mind that this is not a Cat 3 like this says, but it is a Cat 4 hurricane beginning to make its way on off towards the west-northwest, expected to at least have 140 mile per hour sustained winds according to the Hurricane Center as we head towards around 5 to 8 p.m. this evening. I honestly think we could even see some of those winds get up to 135 to 140 sustained as early as the middle of the afternoon around that 2 p.m. update. But we'll definitely have to see what happens. Regardless, this is a very dangerous situation approaching. Pretty much a direct hit towards Grenada, St. Vincent and the Grenadines in the direct path of this, and those 140 plus mile per hour sustained winds with higher gusts going into the early morning hours here of our July 1st, 2024. Not a great way to start a new month. There could be catastrophic conditions ongoing for at least 3 to 6 hours here over some of these islands from Barbados to St. Lucia, points southward as this compact system makes its way on in. St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, as well as Grenada, some of the worst impacts there, as well as with Barbados, all these spots under a hurricane warning as of the latest advisory. We've also got the northern part of Trinidad and Tobago, so Tobago itself there with a hurricane warning as of some of the latest morning updates here. By the way, Martinique is under a tropical storm warning, and then Dominica and Trinidad are under a tropical storm watch. So that's your latest warnings there as the system makes its way on in, as well as some of those watches. By the time we get to the end of our Monday, probably still looking at a feisty Category 4, maybe even a mid-grade or higher-end Category 4, depending on which model or whether you look at that or the Hurricane Center. Going into our early Tuesday morning, the Hurricane Center thinking this will be a low-end 130 mile per hour beast of a Category 4. I call it a low-end Cat 4, that it's still a very intense storm. The Hurricane Center continuing this storm as we go to the end of our Tuesday afternoon here with 125 mile per hour winds, still gusts upwards of 150 miles per hour while tracking south of Hispaniola. The reason the cone widens once you get beyond the 3-day time frame, especially to include places like Jamaica and just south of some of these spots I'm going to circle here in Cuba, as well as Hispaniola, specifically Haiti, is because there's uncertainties in the exact location of where the storm's going to go. The models widen out, so therefore the cone widens out. And what I do want to stress is that on that north side in Jamaica, being on the northern side of the cone is not a good thing, because even if you don't see a direct hit, you'll be on that northern end, which tends to have some of those feistier easterly winds forcing their way on in. While the Hurricane Center shows us dropping from a 3 to a 2 to a 1 going out of Wednesday into Thursday and into Friday here in terms of category, that's likely due to some of the uncertainties with the models as well as the potential for it to weaken. So don't necessarily trust that it will be as low as 85 miles per hour by the time it makes its way to the Yucatan Peninsula, although that's a great number to start at, and that's why they're using it. Again, so with our track guidance here, let's look at the models for their track guidance. Hitting the Windward Islands on Monday morning, really the 5 to 11 a.m. time frame looks like some of the worst times from Barbados heading westward there to the rest of some of the spots I just mentioned with our watches and warnings from Grenada to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. All these surrounding areas, again, make sure you're sending love their way, and I'm sending love your way as well if you're watching from there. Here we go towards our Tuesday morning, the Eastern Caribbean. This is where this is going to be pretty far away from any land at this point, so maybe just some surge on some of the Caribbean islands, but nothing too extreme. Nearing Jamaica, moving through the Jamaica area Wednesday morning and onward. From there, once we get towards Thursday and Friday, looking like likely at this point with the models that we'll see a landfall into our early Friday on the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. Then we see that little curve north into the Western Gulf. We could certainly see some impacts in places like Texas down the road from maybe a tropical storm or hurricane out of this. Definitely something to watch. But again, let's look at the intensity guidance here. Monday, again, looking at a strong Cat 4. The models really, their median is at low-end Cat 4 to even mid-grade Cat 4. Prepare for 140-plus mile-per-hour sustained winds, especially if you're in those hurricane warnings and you take the most direct hit there. And you'll see some of the timing of that in just a second. Going into our Tuesday, over the Eastern Caribbean, still looking at likely a Cat 3 or 4 system. We do see on the models that they do indicate that this system could drop down a little bit. We'll see a little bit of interaction with a high-pressure system nearby. There will be a little bit of some dust, a little bit of some shear interacting with this storm. So going out of Wednesday and into Thursday here while this hits Jamaica, probably some sort of Cat 3. But again, prepare for the worst. Think that this could continue doing what it's been doing and being historic, and assume that it could be a Cat 4 near Jamaica, and prepare for that if you're in that area or the Cayman Islands. Then as we go towards Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we do see a drop down in intensity, likely as it hits the Yucatan Peninsula as some sort of Category 1 or 2. Again, things could certainly change with any of this information I'm giving you, though, so make sure you're staying tuned for the latest updates, not just from me, but especially from the National Hurricane Center at nhc.noaa.gov if you live in any of the affected areas. And again, we could still see a tropical storm heading into the Gulf sometime during the weekend, and that could eventually approach Texas or Louisiana or parts of eastern Mexico there. That is something we'll be watching down the line out of this storm, but let's track out the near term here using the model I used yesterday in my update video. Let's use the same one here because it's been doing a great job with track intensity, all of that, and it really follows along with the track line that the National Hurricane Center has down pretty perfectly, at least for the first 24 hours, as you can see here, or the first 12 hours, I should say, as we go towards around the 11 p.m. time frame of our Sunday evening here. Only got about 5 hours left until the very big hit comes towards Barbados, some of the areas like Grenada on up there towards St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I really think St. Vincent and the Grenadines could take the biggest hit. Notice what I just had circled there, though. Some of those outer bands with tropical storm force winds at the minimum trying to lash on out towards those areas, at least briefly gusty in those bands. But some of those worst bands expanding outward here to some of those windward islands as early now as around 3 to 5 a.m. here. I think some of those worst tropical storm force bands are already going to get going there by then into our Monday morning. Barbados taking a hit from possibly some high-end tropical storm or at least low to mid-grade hurricane force winds here on the northern and eastern side of this storm. Definitely some Cat 3 plus winds, not out of the full question here in a place like Barbados, but especially around this eye where winds are going to come likely from the west to the east near Grenada, as you could very well in Grenada take a couple-hour hit from the eye wall Monday morning here around, say, 8 to 11 a.m., maybe around 12 p.m. as well. Notice St. Vincent and the Grenadines all the way up here to St. Lucia and Barbados still on that northeastern quadrant. That tends to be the worst quadrant of these types of systems, so definitely prepare for a big hit from the hurricane here, especially if you're right in St. Vincent and the Grenadines near that northern eye wall. Again, we can see this wobble a little bit as well, but regardless, we will at least on up there towards some of these spots like Guadeloupe, Dominica, Martinique, see some outer bands push as far north as there. And again, some of these outer bands can definitely produce briefly gusty winds. The only good news about this system, it's smaller and compact, so as it remains likely a Category 4 in the East Central Caribbean, quickly moving hundreds of miles away from these islands into our late Monday, into our early Tuesday. It will be gone. It will be gone quickly there, but it might be a scene of destruction in some of those spots that have the hurricane warnings there, unfortunately, of the Windward Islands. While this continues its trek and maybe tries to get larger over the East Central Caribbean, this is early Tuesday morning, July 2nd, around 5 a.m. Going into the rest of our Tuesday here, we'll see some of those outer bands continue to hit places like Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Haiti. As of now, though, while it could be a little bit further north than where this model indicates, I think it's probably going to follow that hurricane center line, which therefore means that while there will be some outer bands grazing the southern shores, especially of Hispaniola there, heading into the end of our Tuesday, we will not be seeing much more than some briefly maybe gusty winds there, as well as some of those surge concerns, at least on the isolated end, again, on the far northern end of that system. There will definitely be some strong winds. It's just not going to be anything extreme for those areas this time around anyway. Here we go towards our Wednesday morning. The HWRF model indicates that this could be some of the strongest winds that this storm has had all along at this point. And that's why I'm concerned for Jamaica. We see that trend continuing, even though the Hurricane Center loses confidence in wind speeds and drops us down towards a low-end Cat 3 or high-end Cat 2. One, that's still dangerous in the first place heading towards Wednesday. But also these models that indicate more, we could certainly see some Cat 3 to Cat 4 winds on the northern side of this storm trying to lash out at especially the southern parts of Jamaica and the Cayman Islands. So Wednesday will be the day to watch there, and we'll get some new information over the coming hours and days that will help us out with that. But remember how wide this cone could be continuing here towards Wednesday and into early Thursday. It certainly looks like we could still see some sort of low-end hurricane, maybe even a low-end major hurricane approaching parts of the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, heading out of late Thursday and into our Friday as well. Now, one thing that I can tell you is, considering that most of the cone shows this going over the Yucatan, assuming it does so, that will definitely be enough land interaction to significantly weaken this storm down probably to tropical storm criteria here, unless it just grazes the northern tip. But the HWRF, many other models certainly agree that this will probably go right over a lot of the heart of the Yucatan, bringing some hurricane force or at least tropical storm force winds before this thing could turn into some of those question mark areas like eastern Mexico and towards parts of Texas. Looking at the wind swath from the GFS model, this is very interesting to look at to show you exactly some of the steering flow as well and what's limiting the system, what's moving it. Again, there's some of those near-term impacts to the Windward Islands. Again, thoughts, prayers, all that going out to you guys from all over the country here in the USA, from all over the Caribbean as well, I'm sure. Now, down here from Florida, out here into some parts of the Atlantic, you see that area of gray that's just north of this line. That's where we've got pretty much high pressure. We don't have much wind underneath it. All the storms are going either north of it or south of it. The ones north of it are going west to east. The ones south of it are going east to west, and that's driving the storm and pretty much also keeping it away from trying to move on up there towards Cuba and Hispaniola or the Bahamas. Notice how those wind tracks continue to go south of those areas, but pretty much directly over places like Jamaica, as well as the Cayman Islands. Again, that's why we're concerned for there. But what we're also concerned about is what I'm about to kind of jump on into here and zoom in on. These winds are in knots, but we could certainly see some 45 to 55 knot winds, according to the GFS model, entering some parts of the Gulf after that hurricane hit is possible towards the northern Yucatan. Regardless of how strong the system is, that is very uncertain. If anybody tries to tell you exactly how strong this storm is going to be entering the Gulf, if it does this upcoming weekend, they really don't know. But it looks like heading out of Saturday and into Sunday, we could definitely see some sort of tropical storm, or maybe if it has enough time over the southern Gulf waters to re-strengthen, a low-end hurricane that could try to make its way on up there towards either the Mexico coast, the coast of Texas, or the coast of Louisiana. Those look like the main areas where this could go, and then maybe track inland from there, from south to north. So we'll be watching all of that. But for now, let's take a look at that latest 7-day tropical outlook here as of the 8 a.m. advisory from the Hurricane Center on this. Again, there's Hurricane Beryl. We're not going to spend much time on that because that's what's been the topic of the video all the way here so far. But right behind it, we have Invest 96L with a 70% chance of development down the line. This could be our next one that hits the windward or maybe even the leeward islands here of the Caribbean, before tracking into the rest of the Caribbean, maybe skimming places like Puerto Rico, Hispaniola. That one also has a chance of trying to make a run for Cuba, Jamaica, all these spots, the Bahamas, Florida. So basically all these areas, I'm trying to say to you, you need to be on guard for this one. It doesn't look necessarily as strong as Beryl, but it could definitely bring some tropical storm conditions along through some of these spots at the minimum. By the way, Invest 94L has one more day left there in the southwest Gulf right now, where it could try to produce some tropical storm conditions moving towards Mexico. I digress from that, though. Let's talk about the USA's weather here. I know that's what some of you are here for. What I'm drawing out on screen right now is a front that's attached to that little L you see right there just north of Maine into some parts of southeast Canada there. This is a cold front extending from pretty much Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine all the way curling around towards the Carolinas, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Alabama, as well as Louisiana. Showers and storms will fire up into the afternoon and evening. I'll time some of those out in greater detail here in a second here. We'll be watching some severe storms along that boundary here on our Sunday, maybe even into early Monday, into the afternoon there in parts of Georgia, Alabama, surrounding spots. But look at this. Coming out of the end of our Monday and into our early Tuesday, July 2nd, our main focus will be back on up here into the north central plains with yet another storm bringing some severe weather up to the Dakotas, Nebraska, Minnesota, surrounding spots. In fact, some of that will carry over into our Tuesday, not only through the morning and afternoon, but also into the evening and overnight. We're in that summertime pattern where we get some of those MCSs that bring the damaging winds and hail into the overnight hours as main concerns. So from Minnesota and Wisconsin to Kansas, that little boundary there will be our main spots of concern for Tuesday, and then as we go towards Wednesday, that continues heading eastward and southeastward here, albeit very slowly. So looking like, and the Storm Prediction Center agrees on this as well, from the Ohio Valley back to the Central Plains, that will be our main focus, maybe even on up there into some of the high plains on Wednesday. And then the important July 4th, right? Let's see what it's looking like for your July 4th plans. Well, if you're trying to grill out, do anything throughout the late morning into the afternoon here on our July 4th, looking very active, especially over the Ohio Valley, and then in another pocket where we're going to have a trough moving into the North Central Plains. This could mean we're going to have some natural fireworks being fired off from the sky into our evening on Thursday, so that's something we're going to have to watch. But anyway, right before I film this video, this is what the outlook from the Storm Prediction Center looked like for today's severe weather. I'll probably post an ONW severe scale after this video in my channel's community tab if you want to subscribe for that. But that is my custom severe weather graphic. Let's just time it out here. For now with the HRRR model, and there is up to a level 3 of 5 severe weather threat from the Storm Prediction Center here, coming out of New York and Pennsylvania, in towards parts of Connecticut and Massachusetts. We could already see some storms firing on up here, as well as in surrounding spots of the Northeast. Around 2 to 3 p.m. this afternoon, so right after I release this video, already going to be seeing some severe warnings along this area, especially if you're in the yellow and orange. That's where you need to be on some of the highest alert. Heading towards 2, 3, 4 o'clock this afternoon, a lot of these storms along the I-95 corridor, or just west or east of it, depending on where you are. Boston, Massachusetts, we could be seeing some impacts then. But this isn't the only round. You notice some of those storms back to the west of it. That's the actual front. So while some of these storms carry through eastern and central Maine, kind of back towards the southwest of that, notice we'll see some new ones fire up. New York City could see 2 rounds, one in the early afternoon, one into the late evening here. In fact, it's just going to be a very active period here from the Carolinas all the way on up here to Maine. So be weather aware, be vigilant, have a way to receive alerts, especially if you plan to be outside, go to the pool, anything of that nature if you do that. Any of this stuff, any outdoor plans, just be vigilant of these storms late through our Sunday. Also, here as we go through the rest of our Sunday, we've got a level 1 to level 2 of 5 threat from the Storm Prediction Center for severe weather in parts of the high plains, going into the north central plains as well, coming out of the mountain west. See some of these storms with damaging wind and hail potential firing up from Colorado up into parts of South Dakota, as well as in Montana into the late afternoon and evening hours here. Look at this cell in Montana. This could try to form into an MCS, one of those mesoscale convective systems that try to get going in the summer here. Notice from Great Falls to the southeast, and then heading all the way in over there towards western parts of South Dakota. This is where, right after this video, the Storm Prediction Center might try to upgrade to a hatched risk, depending on whether they think these winds could be damaging enough or not. That's something we'll have to see, but I'll be releasing my ONW severe scale, like I said, so you can see what my thoughts are specifically on the severe weather. If I make one of those severe scales, again, I will post it in the community tab of the channel this afternoon, so make sure you're looking out for that. But for now, consider hitting that subscribe button if you want more updates from the channel right here. Consistent, accurate, and easy to understand. That's what you can expect, whether it's with American weather or the tropics. I got you covered. That's it for this video. Thanks so much for joining me in this longer edition of One Nation Weather. I'll see you back here Monday or Tuesday.
One Nation Weather.